Good afternoon, everybody. This is Allison from Fanshawe Pioneer Village. Today we will be doing Chapter 2 of The Boy with an R in His Hand by James Reaney. This chapter is called By Way to Uncle John's. Chapter 2, By the Way to Uncle John's. "My name's French, Charlie French," said the youth who had rescued Alec. He was taller than either of them, with a wide mouth, fond of grinning, washed-out blue eyes, and sandy hair. Joel introduced himself, and then opened their bundle to get out dry clothes for his brother. He apologized for his brother's carelessness. "Say, fellow, why did you fall over?" "Were you trying to commit suicide? Were you heartbroken?" Alec shook his head and smiled. He was watching the swallows dart back and forth from their nests in the sandy bank under the wharf. The swallows paid no attention either to them or to the crowd of people jostling on the wharf just above Alec's head. Some barrels were being rolled off of the Canada. "Rump, rump, 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 rumpity rump," they said as the men rolled them up the wharf. "It was seeing that black man on the wharf," laughed Joel. He wrung on Alec's wet clothes. "That's Speakable Smith. He always comes down to see the boats come in. You folks never see a black man before?" Joel said no, they never had. He and his brother were from a part of the world where there had never been African slaves. "Regular Garden of Eden, eh?" grunted French. He took a clay pipe out of his pocket and lit it skillfully from a tinder box that he took out of another pocket. "Not always," said Alec. He smoothed out the wrinkles in his buckskin leggings, which he hadn't been wearing since their coming to Niagara a week ago. Just this moment, a particularly loud, rumbling sound overhead proclaimed the fact that Lady Catherine's coach was being rolled onto the wharf. Horses to pull it could be heard approaching. Through a crack between the boards, they could see the gold glittering on the sides of the coach. "Where you're from isn't even in Canada," said French. He picked up the fish he'd caught. "No, it isn't," said Joel, feeling rather foreign. What French said was true. The Red River settlement was a separate British colony hundreds of miles away from the colonies known as the Canadas, Upper and Lower. The boys just landed in the capital of Upper Canada. "Well, you're in Canada now, boys, and I'll show you some of our choicest sights." They walked out from under the wharf, scrambled up the bank, and so onto the road that led to the town. "But where were you going to?" asked French. "We want to go to our uncle's place," said Joel. "His name's John McAllister." "John Simcoe McAllister, Esquire? That's a good kind of uncle to have." "Why?" "They say he's the Chief Justice soon. Come on, I'll show you to his door. Are you fellows orphans or something like that?" "Yes," said Joel. "Mother died when we were in Scotland. I don't know if Alec can remember her." "Oh, I can," said Alec quietly. His eyes were kept very busy with all of the new, strange things to see. "We came out with Father," continued Joel, "to the Red River settlement. Do you know how we came out? It was in a sailboat, and it was to another place called York. Only it was York on Hudson's Bay, not York on Lake Ontario." "I guess that's about 1,000 miles away, isn't it?" said French. "More than that. And then we came down quite a way, I guess, to Red River. Father stayed a while, and then he left us with Mr. Sutherland, while he went off to preach to the Indians." "Was your father a preacher?" said French. "Yes. Are you surprised?" "Here, let me carry your bundle for you. It isn't every day I get to help fellows like you. What happened to your father?" The hunters came back to the wall. The hunters came back in the fall, and the story that the Sioux Indians had killed the white priest and some Siltos Indians. He was traveling down across the prairie, but our father had told Mr. Sutherland that if he did not come back, we should be sent up to his brother-in-law John, down in Upper Canada. In the spring, we came here with the voyageurs. "I can remember Scotland, too," announced Alec suddenly. "And I can remember that other place called York. I can remember the people. They paddled about in little boats called kayaks, and they could turn sideways somersault in them." "You're in Canada now," said French, "and I don't advise you try any more of them somersaults in the water." Ahead of them moved the coach. It was preceded and followed by other passengers who were going to their various inns and houses, or perhaps to the stagecoach office, or perhaps to the farms in the wilderness north of town. Joel left Joel felt that people were laughing at them, particularly at Alec's buckskin leggings. Red River clothes were much different from those worn in Upper Canada, and he dreaded being outlandish in any way whatsoever. Alec loved wearing his leggings and was relieved not to have sketchy woolen pantaloons on anymore. Lady Catherine's coach turned off to the left toward the front and towards the government house. On the side of her conveyance, a coat of arms showed a fierce lion and a unicorn with a sharp horn. Alex thought that they glared at him from the coach as they turned. "Look at the earth, Joel," said Alec, kicking up the dust of King Street. "It's different from our earth back home, isn't it?" "What's your earth like?" asked French. He shifted their bundle from one shoulder to the other. "Red River earth is black, not brown like this. Hey, Joe, look at all the people over there." To their left, there was a church with a spire and a cross on the top. Next were some red brick buildings that French informed them were the new courthouse and the new jail. A crowd of people were gathered there, horsemen, farmers in wagons, all with their backs to the boys. "They're watching a man get hanged," explained French. Don't you see the gallows? They'll hang him in 4 o'clock. At 4 o'clock. "How awful to hang a man," said Alec. "No matter what he's done. What has the poor wretched creature done to deserve this?" "Killed somebody," said Joel. "You have to be hanged if you've murdered someone." "Well," said French mysteriously. They turned down King Street, and Alec remarked on all of the curious signs over the shop doors. One house had a large wooden boot hanging over its door, and the boot had a crown on it. "That's the shoemaker," explained French. That's a thing you'll soon find out about here. You may have wondered why some of those loafers were joking about you down on the wharf, but you see, it's your moccasins. Don't you ever wear shoes?" Here's a picture of the sign. Behind it you can see an anvil, and that must be the blacksmith shops. The boys looked down at their feet, and it was almost as if they had been told that they had no toes. Yes, shameful it was, but true. For years now they had always worn moccasins. Joel resolved to get hold of some shoes right away, the moment he could get permission from Uncle John. Alec was still really thinking about the hanging, but the other signs that hung along the street soon drove the ideas of both hanging and moccasins from the boy's mind. Over a carpenter shop there was a large cut-out wooden axe. Over the gunman's door, a giant rifle. Over the tailor's, a golden fleece. And over the blacksmith's, an anvil and a hammer. Over the grocer's, a gilded tea chest. And last of all, at the fur trading post, a huge picture of a ferocious Indian, with a tomahawk in his hands and some skins hanging down from his belt. Suddenly there was a flurry of hooves, and French yelled at them to get out of the way. A horseman had nearly ridden them down from behind. They could hear him laughing through the clouds of dust that rose up behind their horse. And Alec's shoulders stung from the rider's whip that had struck him. "Who is he, and why did he do that?" asked Alec. "Jarvis," replied French. "He likes routing down any apprentice of Mr. Mackenzie. He had Jim Baxter limping around for about a week." "Are you an apprentice? Who's Mr. Mackenzie?" asked Joel, all in one breath. "Who's this Jarvis?" interrupted Alec. "You'll find out," said French. "Why does he ride you down?" "Mr. Jarvis is a Tory. My master, Mr. Mackenzie, is a reformer. He prints a paper that says the Tories run the government for themselves and not for the people, so all their young blades try to chase Mackenzie's boy off the road." "What on earth is a Tory?" asked Alec. "Perhaps you should leave Mr. Mackenzie's office," said Joel gravelly. "You might get killed by these Tory riders." "I can't leave," said French, "because I've sworn to work as his apprentice in his printing shop until I'm 20 years old. So I'll take my chance. You want to know what a Tory is?" By this time, the apprentice of Mackenzie and rescuer of Alec had guided them up the side street, where he paused at a spot across the road from a handsome brick house. They soon understood this to be their uncle's house. "Here's a Tory house," said French, handing over the bundle to Joel. "You ask him what a Tory is. Better not tell him an apprentice of Mackenzie helped you to his door, or he may throw you out." Here is a picture of the boys going by with Mr. Jarvis having tried to run them down. There's one thing, though. You know that Jarvis that wrote us down? When he was a young fellow, he killed another lad, younger than he was, in a duel. But did he hang for it? No, for one reason and another, mainly because his father was provincial secretary. But he killed somebody. Surely, Joel was puzzled. Wait a second. You know the guy they're hanging today, old Isaac Wharton? Did he kill somebody? No. Do you know what he killed? No, said Joel. Joel didn't know whether he liked his uncle being called a Tory or not. How could we know? We only just came here. You know why they're hanging him? Because he stole and slaughtered a cow. The boys were too astonished to say anything to this, and before they could say goodbye to French, he had walked down the street beneath the shadow of some huge willow trees, come out into the sunlight again, and turned sharply right on King Street, where he disappeared from view. That is all for today. I hope everyone has a lovely afternoon, and we will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.